Teaching a child to request or mand. Request or mands are typically the first verbal operant acquired by children. Learning to request can include anything from a food item like a cookie, a toy, or even a preferred activity. By learning to request, children can decrease disruptive behaviors as they will have functional modes of communication to gain access to their wants and needs in their environment. Cookie. Cookie.
Cookie. Cookie.
Cookie.
Oh,
You did. You got a whole one because you said cookie all by yourself. Nice asking for cookie. High five. Good job, buddy. The instructor begins by delivering the reinforcer with model for pairing trials. The instructor piques the child's interest by holding the cookie where the child can see it, but it's just out of reach. The key to success is speaker motivation. The instructor uses a full prompt with a 0-second time delay. Cookie. By avoiding other words, the child is more likely to only repeat the word cookie. Beginning with a full prompt prevents the child from making an error and becoming frustrated. The instructor provides immediate positive reinforcement following the request. The instructor immediately repeats the exercise, providing less assistance or a faded prompt. Notice that the instructor does not say, "What do you want?" Teaching a child to only respond to phrases such as "what do you want" could lower spontaneous requesting in the future, as a child could become dependent on waiting for someone to ask them what they want before making a request. Each time the child was able to request the cookie with less prompting than they were in the previous trial. You did. You got a whole one because you said cookie. When delivering reinforcement during man training, avoid unnecessary words like "good job." Using just the name of the reinforcer itself will help the child to pair the word cookie with the actual cookie when making later request. Select the response form that the child will use. Remember, requests can come in many different forms. It can include pointing, signing for an item, or a picture exchange. Select the response form the child will be most successful with and therefore more likely to use. Teach when motivation is strong. Remember, practice makes perfect. Build the child's needs before they have to ask for items and activities, such as asking "what do you want?" or providing free access to the items in the child's environment. These steps will help increase the likelihood that the child will request spontaneously. Once a child is requesting a single item, additional items can be taught. It is important to stick to single word request until the child is able to request a large amount of preferred items and activities, such as 20 to 30 different items, before multiple word requests are going to be required. Using sentences to request, such as "I want cookie," should be delayed until the child has a large enough repertoire of single word requests to have his or her needs met. Use database decision making. Collecting data will track the level of prompting required for each target, as well as the total number of targets the child has acquired.
Hi, I'm Amanda.
And I'm Valerie.
And today we're going to go over some man training. Miss Valerie, can you tell us about man training?
Of course, man training is whenever we withhold an item from
the kid, and then the kid can ask for it back. Awesome. So is manding like asking? Yes, manding is asking for an item, and they can ask politely as well. Awesome. So let's take a look at how that can look like. The goal with man training is to get as many words and manners out as possible. So I'm going to put my toy toys closer to me so I can prompt her to ask politely and with nice words for the toys. Oh, you want something? Grandpa, please. Oh, that's awesome asking for Grandpa. Nice job. Piano, please. I want piano, please. Awesome asking. Here you go. Can I have couch? Awesome asking. This time let's use an adjective, okay? Okay. Can I use pink couch, please? Awesome job. Of course you can. As I talked about, in the beginning of the video, we are prompting our kids to use more words and manners. And as you can see, at the end of the video, I had my kid use an adjective because I knew they were capable of it. Thank you, Miss Mallory, for showing us how you do man training. I love that you were showing us how you meet every kid at their level and bump it up every time, getting more words and more manners, just like we said. Thank you for watching.
Hi, my name is Christine and I'm a behavior therapist at Autism Recovery Network. So man or manding is a request for a want or need, and it's typically controlled by a child's deprivation, satiation, or motivation for something. Through manding, children with autism learn that they can get the things they want or need by asking, and manding teaches them how to communicate that. Manding provides children with autism an alternative to problem behaviors. So instead of screaming or crying when their parents don't give them their favorite snack, they try to convey their wants and needs. We begin teaching them to use basic requests. If they're verbal, we teach them one-word requests. If they're not verbal, we teach them how to sign for it first, and once they've mastered that stage, we then go on to teach them how to imitate words. Here our therapist, Miss Rowena, is teaching this little girl how to mend. For her age, she's not very verbal, so she's first being taught to make sounds to mend. First, Miss Rowena will ask the girl to choose between a bottle of bubbles or a baby bite snack, both of which are things that the girl likes. The girl grabs the bottle of bubbles, and then Miss Rowena will teach her to mend for it. At the start of mend training, we reinforce close approximations of the word. So Ms. Rowena will provide the verbal stimuli "buh," which the girl will learn to imitate, and then she will learn to say "buh" to inform others that she wants to play with bubbles.
Ba. Ba. Say it. Ba.
Yay! Good girl! Eventually, we will shape her to say the complete word. Over time, we will also teach her demand for basic necessities like water or toilet. She'll eventually learn to form more complex sentences. So instead of just bubbles, she'll learn to say, "I want bubbles." Over time, she'll learn to make more specific demands like, "I want to play bubbles." Mending is not just for physical objects. It could also be for social cues like hugs or high fives, to initiate activities, or to even gather information. If children with autism are to become more independent when they grow up, especially when their parents are not around, they must be able to learn how to communicate their needs and wants, and mending helps to establish that skill.
Whoa, this baby. You Rosie. Quite a sexy.
There you go, good pointing. You get the second. Good pointing. You get the duck.
Okay, so no vocal.
You don't need to do any vocals because what you're trying to get is some sort of request. You can also do it for eye contact. Woo! Good looking. And you can hold it in front of your face. Nice looking at me. There you go, as your prompt.
And that would be a visual.
Those would be, yeah, these would all be visual prompts if they're close to your face. And then, you know, for the words, you can actually just leave them up and model if you need to. But right now, her vocal imitation's also kind of,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, it's the mama phone.
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 Good job. Jump, jump, jump. Woo! Tackle. And physical stuff, like if he likes it, that's a good one for eye contact. Is that you don't like pick her up or turn around.
She
Or
had some of those today because she wanted to be picked up. And she turned to me and looked me in the eye and put her arms out.
Yep.
So she could switch over to the chair.
For students who have limited communication skills and many challenging behaviors, you might start teaching requesting skills via early manned request training. Identify items that your child or student is motivated to obtain. A reinforcer survey could be completed by staff and family. Here are some examples. You can click the attached links in this answer to locate these surveys. You can also perform a motivation assessment survey with your child or student. Check this procedure on this website. Set opportunities throughout the day for the child to see the item but be unable to obtain until he or she uses spoken language. When your child shows interest, even by looking or reaching, label the item and wait 1 to 3 seconds for him to echo you. Ball. Buh. Even if it's an approximation, give the item. Oh, you want the ball. If the child does not request, prompt, or provide the model, ball. Once the student can say the word, fade your prompts, but wait 3 seconds and say only the initial sound, buh. Buh. Ball. Ball. Yes, you want the ball. For some children, you may need to teach requesting with a different response form, such as sign language.
Hi everybody, welcome back to Teachable Moments by Aspire. My name's Kim Moore and I'm here to help you learn how to bring ABA into your home. And today we're going to continue our conversation about communication. And we're really going to focus today on encouraging those vocal communications. In later episodes, we will learn how to encourage other types of communication. But today we're going to talk about manned training. And applied behavior analysis, when we talk about requests, we often use the word manned, which is short for demand. And you can think about that as my child demands many things from me per day. And I will say that because we are in quarantine, my children are demanding many things from me per day. So the word demand is probably more appropriate than request anyway. So we're going to talk about manned training, and I kind of have some tips that I'll go through to help you maximize the most learning in your home. So the first thing we're going to do, it's not new to you. You're going to go back to that list of reinforcing activities that you made before. And if you haven't made one, go back to our Aspire Academy Facebook page and just spend a little bit of time looking for those documents that relate to reinforcing activity ideas, and spend that time now to just like play with your child and see what he or she likes. Because number one, in man training is going to be to pick a couple of items that you know are pretty motivating for your child. So I have a couple examples here today. I have a slinky. I have a dice. There's some fun things we can do with that I'll talk about in a bit. And this is just like a little learning activity that I often use for a little manned training activity. Just some logs with some frogs that you can do patterning and things. But lots of the little kids just even like putting the frogs along the log. So number 2, before you begin, let's think about what word we're going to use for each of the items to teach your child to mand for. And like the word slinky, for example, is kind of hard. So then you can think, okay, well, what does he like to do with the slinky? And a lot of the kids like the activity where they just put it down the stairs, kind of what it's meant for. Well, then that could be down, and duh or down is a little bit easier to say for many than slinky. So think about, I think, they like this to go down the stairs. So slinky. For the dice activity, a lot of kids like it if you roll it and then it links to a fun people game. So they can say like dice or roll dice, and then the number that comes up equals how many maybe spins they get, or how many times you blow the bubbles, or run back and forth across the room, or dance for 4 minutes. It can really relate to a lot of different things. But think about what word we're going to use when we're encouraging those vocalizations. And for this one, frog, again, is really hard. But maybe when the log's down, they like it when you hop the frog over to him. So it could be maybe hop. Just a few different examples. And then number 3, we're going to create opportunities for your child to want to ask for this, which means those fun activities that you would like to encourage. So develop the games for them. If you just pull this out, your child might be like, okay, what do you want me to do with that? But number 4 is that the way we engage our child is that we give them a teaser or a freebie at first. So maybe your child's over playing on the floor with some trains, and you just put this down the stairs, and suddenly they're like, look up. And you're like, down? And then you put it down again. Maybe your child picks it up at the bottom of the stairs and is smiling or laughing. And you watch for those signs of motivation. And when they hand it back to you, you say, down. And if your child at any point says duh or down or whatever it is your child can say for it, maybe they do say slinky, then you want to make sure you give it right away, which is number 5. So 5 is deliver the item once your child mans or requests for it. So you're at the top of the stairs, and this is a nice activity because the kids often can't do it themselves. So you're at the top of the stairs and you say down, and they say down, or duh, and you let it go down.
You know what? She should use the word slinky, because now they're going to call that a down instead of a slinky. Or use something else that's not so hard to say, or just call it a slink or something. But by giving it a different word, you're going to confuse the shit out of the child and confuse the shit out of everybody else that's around them.
Stairs. And then you run back up. Then number 6 is if your child...
By giving it a different word, you're going to confuse the shit out of the child and confuse the shit out of everybody else that's around.
With small little pauses in between to see if we can encourage it. And you have to really see where your child's at with his or her frustration, because you don't want to get to the point that they're like, forget it, this activity is way too hard. So really watch for that. Maybe your child can only handle it if you say it twice. If he can wait for you to say it, 3 or 4 times or 3 to 5 times, then that's fantastic. So you're up at the top of the stairs and you say, your child's motivated, and you say down, and they say duh or down. Then right away. You do that.
She's really not, she's explaining how to do it, but not why, unfortunately. So I'm going to get out of man training because it's boring me. They're pretty much repeating the same little things. See what we got here. Functional communication training.
Hello, I'm Sarah, and I'm a board-certified behavior analyst. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how ABA can be used to teach communication skills within the context of replacing a difficult behavior, such as tantrums, aggression, or self-injurious behavior. This process is called Functional Communication Training, or FCT. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's get started. Just like all other parts of a behavior intervention plan, or BIP, the functional communication training process should be informed by the function of a behavior. To recap, a behavior happens for usually at least one of 4 reasons or functions: to obtain a sensory experience, to escape something non-preferred or aversive, to get attention from someone, or to get access to something tangible. Functional communication training only applies to behaviors maintained by access to a tangible, escape from something, or attention, because these reinforcers can be withheld or given by other people. When you teach functional communication, you teach the learner to use a request that serves the same function as a challenging behavior. For example, if a learner engages in hitting other people to communicate that they want ice cream, you would teach the learner to request for ice cream in an appropriate way. This request would serve the function.
Notice how this is literally functional. This is definitely procedural. It has nothing to do with the well-being of the child. The well-being of the child is not mentioned.
Of access to ice cream and would replace the hitting behavior. The best time to teach this request would be right before, during, or immediately after the behavior occurs. Ideally, you can prompt the learner to make the appropriate request right after the antecedent or trigger to the behavior happens and before the behavior happens, but this doesn't always work out. When the learner uses an appropriate request, you give the learner what they ask for immediately and as often as possible. In the context of behavior reinforced by escape from something non-preferred, like doing chores, you would reinforce the appropriate request for escape by allowing them out of that non-preferred situation. In the context of a challenging behavior reinforced by attention, you would follow an appropriate request for attention with preferred forms of attention. Let's go back to the learner who hits to get ice cream. When the learner lifts his or her hand to hit,
This person is monotone as hell.
to get access to ice cream, you could prompt the learner by telling them, say ice cream, and when the learner says ice cream, you would give the learner ice cream, instead of giving them ice cream in response to hitting. The functional request should be easy for the learner to say and remember. It can be helpful to teach one catch-all or omnibus request, such as my way, which is often taught in Greg Hanley's skill-based treatment method. At the beginning of teaching, the learner can use this one phrase to request for anything they want. At this point in treatment, avoid trying to teach the learner to say please or thank you or to use long or complicated sentences. We can tackle those skills later once the learner is comfortable using a simple request. If the learner is nonverbal and does not vocally imitate, you might have to use a different type of request, such as a picture exchange, sign language, or pointing to request. A BCBA or speech therapist can help you identify the best communication modality for your learner. Unlike the vocal modeling required when you're teaching a vocal request, non-vocal communication requires different types of prompts from the one who's teaching the communication. This can involve hand-over-hand prompting, physically demonstrating or modeling the request, or using visual supports. You might be thinking, all that sounds great, but what if I can't always honor the learner's requests? For example, it would be a questionable choice to allow the learner out of the demand to brush their teeth, or to let them eat ice cream for breakfast every day just because they asked nicely. Try to only prompt the request when you can readily honor it, so that the learner learns that they can rely on this request to get what they want instead of using challenging behavior to get it. Then, when the learner is consistently using that request instead of engaging in challenging behavior, you can start denying the request and teaching the learner to accept not getting their way all the time without getting upset. This involves using other components of that behavior intervention plan as well as some other teaching procedures, so I'll cover that in another video. It can be helpful to follow a functional communication training procedure that's designed and written down by a BCPA to ensure that your method.
She just went, and I really didn't get much out of what she said at all. Unfortunately.
Sorry about that, and skill development to help in a variety of domains. So for example, we might be working on teaching social skills, so greeting peers, sharing.
Okay, we're going to go to the beginning of this here. Now, the one thing that I will tell you Autism 202, best practices in ASD treatment, applied behavioral analysis update. Now, the one thing that this will not do is ever address the goodness, the wellness, the well-being of the patients. That is never going to be addressed. The feelings, the thoughts, the emotions, the sensitivities of the autistic kid and what they're experiencing will never be taken into consideration. What will be the only thing that will be taken into consideration is making the child do what you want them to do. And I haven't seen this, so let's take a look. But that's what's going to happen here. And this is going to be very, very formalized, and these people are going to be absolutely convinced that they are just the utmost experts of this, and they are going to present this in a way as if they are those set experts.
The clinical director of the Seattle Children's Autism Center and also the director of the Applied Behavior Analysis Early Intervention Program. I'm going to introduce, and then Liz, my colleague, who I'll tell you about in just a minute, is going to do a big chunk of our content tonight. And then I'll be kind of coming back in toward the end with some comments about kind of a little bit of the history of the field, the current status, and kind of where we think the field is headed. So Liz gave me some facts about herself today. I wish they were more interesting. So I'm going to try to spice it up because she didn't give me.
So to give you an overview,
we're going to just skip all that.
We're going to start by looking at what is applied behavior analysis, or ABA. We'll talk about a little bit about some of the basics, so some of those concepts and terminology that you'll frequently hear. We'll get a little bit into some of the applications, some quality indicators of ABA, and then we're going to.
Okay, I'm not going to sit there and go through the intro. I'm just not going to do it.
Characteristics of the field. So the first one is this word applied. And when we're talking about applied, we're talking about improving socially significant behavior. So thinking about.
Okay, so we're just starting. We're already ignoring the patient. And we're going straight into they are a behavioral problem. They are just bad children that need to be corrected.
Behaviors that are really meaningful for an individual. So things like helping them to use their words to get their needs and wants met, those types of behaviors. The next characteristic is behavioral. So what we're looking at are behaviors in an observable and measurable way. And so we're going to talk a little bit later on in terms of how we define behaviors, how we track behaviors, so that we can all agree about what we're looking at. The next characteristic is analytic. So this is when you might hear, the terms demonstrating experimental control. And all that means is that we are looking at whether or not the interventions we're using are what is causing the behavior to change and not something else. The next characteristic is technological. So for this one, I want you to think of a recipe. So the procedures and the protocols that we're using are written out in such a way that they are defined.
Uh-oh, this is not good. Okay,
very clearly,
Twitch, you gotta go.
Great detail so that everyone can be sure of what they're supposed to be doing. The next characteristic, conceptually systematic. So this refers to the idea that everything we're doing, the procedures we're implementing, are tied back to the basic principles of behavior that have been well researched and proven to be effective across a large body of literature. And we're going to talk about what some of those basic principles are a little bit later on. The next one is effective. So this one is kind of telling you what it is right off the bat. So making sure that the behavior change is changed to a socially significant degree. So it was meaningful for that individual that it was changed in whatever way we were trying to change it. And then the last characteristic that we talk about is generality, or you may have heard it referred to as generalization. So I often like to tell parents that a behavior is really no good if an individual can only do it in one location with a certain set of materials or a certain group of people. Instead, what we want to have happen is that we teach a skill, we teach a behavior, and it lasts over time. We see it happening in.
Notice how this is just all about behaviors. This is all about a child misbehaving. Nothing about their neurological sensitivities. Not even touching on the fact that ASD is not a psychological problem. It is a neurological difference. So it's not just a bunch of kids behaving, but that's how we're going to treat it, because we don't know what else to do. That's just what we do.
Other areas with other people. So we're saying that that skill has been generalized to other settings, to different environments, and again, and extending over time. So shifting gears and thinking more specifically in terms of how this relates to the treatment of autism spectrum disorders or other developmental disabilities is how we're using these procedures to help improve.
And this is flatly a lie. We'll see what she says here, but
of ASD. And so what ABA is doing in those situations is providing services that support learning and
whoa, yeah, okay.
and skill development to help in a variety of domains. So for example, we might be working on teaching social skills, so greeting peers, sharing, maybe turn taking. We might be looking at communication, so you often hear functional communication training, and that basically just means helping somebody to learn to use their words in order to get their needs and wants met. Play is another domain that we might look at teaching skills in, especially if you're thinking about an early intervention approach, because play is one way that...
Okay, I don't think she's going to read this. Applied behavioral analysis assists children and their families to improve the core symptoms associated with autism spectrum disorders and other developmental disabilities. Bullshit. That's wrong. It does not improve the core symptoms. It does not change the symptomology at all. It is neurological. Neurological. No matter what they do, no matter what skills they teach, it's still a neurological disorder. You are not going to change that. You're going to change how they appear, but you're not going to change what's going on in here and how this operating system works. You're going to be able to change it to make it appear more pleasant to you and the other neurotypical people around, but you're hurting that brain. You are hurting it by trying to manipulate it to do shit that it's not supposed to do. If it was supposed to do those things, it would, naturally. But it's not supposed to. It operates in a different way. ABA services support learning, skill development, and assistance in any of the following areas or domains: social, communication, play, behavior, adaptive, motor, or cognitive. No, they don't. Not necessarily. It can. ABA inadvertently can do some things to help in some situations, but that is not the core. And that is not the purpose. The purpose is to make kids look neurotypical.
That we teach some foundational social behaviors in young children, things like joint attention, those sorts of behaviors. In addition, we might be teaching behavior skills such as learning how to handle frustrating situations, like being told you have to wait for something that you really want. Those can be really challenging situations for individuals. So we look at teaching waiting skills. That would be an example. Also looking at adaptive skills, so maybe toileting or feeding or dressing perhaps. Motor skills, whether those are fine motor or gross motor skills, and also some cognitive skills. So you might have heard things like teaching matching or teaching imitation. And while sometimes those skills can seem very basic, they're so essential for the foundation of learning, and they're oftentimes skills that many typically developing individuals have acquired in a very organic and natural way just through their development, but are sometimes skills that we have to explicitly teach to individuals with autism spectrum disorders or other developmental disabilities in order for them to then be able to engage in more advanced types of.
Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, the skills that they're trying to develop and so forth are simply just due to a lack of parenting, is what I'm finding. A lot of these things that they're teaching is just basic parenting. Just basic given parentings that people can't do. And if they can't parent, this is the problem. If you have a neurotypical child and you can't parent, that neurotypical child can compensate. A autistic child can't compensate nearly as well for a lack of parenting. And unfortunately, in most cases, the child is not the number one priority for the parent. There are other priorities: work, boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever else. Their favorite hobbies, golf, whatever, are their actual priorities, not the children. The children are just another thing that they do, so to speak. Now, if the child is literally the focus of their attention, you're not going to have these issues. Unless there are extreme support needs, in which case ABA is not going to be able to do anything either.
Learning. And one thing I'd like to point out about this is that ABA is not a standalone treatment. We are consistently collaborating with a variety of other providers, whether that's a speech and language therapist, maybe an occupational therapist, maybe individuals who are other behavior analysts who have an expertise in an area like feeding or intensive behavior. So that's an important idea to keep in mind, is that we are not the only ones in there providing this treatment. We're really working collaboratively with a variety of other professionals. So what is ABA? All it is this relationship.
It's torture.
Between behavior.
ABA is torture for children.
Behavior and the environment that govern behavioral changes every single day, and that's learning. So for example, maybe a child is tantruming in order to attempt to gain access to a toy, but in that moment the individual does not give the toy to the child, and so they learn that, okay, maybe the tantrum isn't effective in gaining access to what I want. Or on the flip side, maybe the child uses their words and asks really nicely for that toy, and the parent or caregiver brings them that toy, and now they've learned that they can use their words in order to gain access to what they want. So those are just a quick couple examples of some of the learning. And again, ABA is just systematically applying these behavior principles to purposely create behavior change and learning. So now that we've talked a little bit about what is ABA, now we're going to start talking about some of the very basics of applied behavior analysis. So you're going to hear us talk a lot about this three-term contingency, the ABC sequence. So the A stands for antecedent, and that means whatever happens right before the behavior that might cue the behavior or trigger the behavior. The behavior.
Notice this is all behavior. This is all about the child misbehaving when they're not. They're just being a autistic child, a neurodivergent. That's all they're doing. But they're considering these neurodivergents to be behavior issues.
Response. And I like to make a clarification on this because oftentimes this is something that can be a little bit confusing. Sometimes when parents hear, oh, your child had a behavior today, that sounds bad. But in reality, behavior could be a lot of things. Behavior is me talking. Behavior is me raising my hand in the classroom.
Yeah, but the thing is even behavioral therapists, even everybody in ABA, they use the word behavior in a negative context.
So it can be a variety of responses.
That's absolutely true, but that's not how it's used.
And all that is whatever happens right after the behavior that either increases or decreases the future likelihood that that behavior will occur again.
When it's neurological, you don't have a fucking choice. And if you want to look at it, the antecedent, somebody turns on the fluorescent lights at a school, a child gets irritated, and now they're going to be punished. That's the consequence. They're going to be punished for their sensitivities. That's how it really works in true life. It isn't that they are acting out because they are sitting in their seat and they are jumping around and getting up and moving around. That's what happened before. So the behavior is they're getting up because they don't want to do their work, and we're going to punish them. Where it may be simply for fluorescent lighting that's actually hurting them, but they can't tell you that because they don't know why. So that can be a real problem. This perception, the entire approach from the get-go, from the start, is the problem. Not necessarily all the things that ABA does. It's the approach and the premise that is the problem.
Consequence, sometimes we hear it and it sounds like it's a bad thing, and that's not necessarily the case when we're talking about it within the framework of the ABC contingency. It's just whether or not the behavior is going to increase or decrease in the future.
Bullshit.
So here's a quick example for you. The antecedent is mom asks, "What do you want?" And the child responds, "Goldfish." And the consequence is mom gives that child the goldfish. So in this situation, likely what will happen is the child will use the word goldfish in the future in order.
And for training purposes, this works just perfectly fine. But in real world, with ABA practice, this is not what goes on. It is not benign by any means, as this example is.
That favorite snack. So now we're going to talk a little bit about how we use...
This is so horrible. ABA interventions focus on understanding and altering the environment to change behavior using the ABA or ABC contingencies. What this should say is ABA interventions focus on understanding the child's needs, their background, history, neurological issues, their sensitivities. Period. End of story. That's it. But no, we're making this a behavior issue. We are creating behavior problems so that we can fix them, so that we can be the hero, is how this is working.
The ABC contingency to help teach skills and help teach individuals to learn. And so really what these interventions focus on doing is understanding and altering those environmental conditions at different places within the contingency. So again, there are naturally occurring contingencies happening all of the time that result in learning. But what we're doing specifically in the treatment of autism is controlling some of these contingencies.
It's all about control. Control, 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 control. This is all about power and control. This is a power and control dynamic, unfortunately. This is so fucking cultish. This is so cultish. This is so bad.
And we're doing that to either increase desirable behaviors, so to teach skills by creating opportunities.
And who decides what those desirable behaviors are? The therapist, not the child. What the child may be doing is perfectly fine, and in their world, nothing's wrong.
Or to help decrease undesirable behaviors. So reducing disruptive or maladaptive behaviors, again, by understanding and altering the existing 3-term or ABC contingency.
But not by understanding the child. We're not going to take the child into consideration whatsoever. And they haven't here. They're only taking into consideration the power and control of what they are going to do to this child. Unbelievable.
So there are 3 basic principles of applied behavior analysis. The first is reinforcement, and that means that we are adding or taking away something from the environment that's going to increase the future frequency of behavior. So we're going to talk a little bit about this more when we're talking about teaching new skills that we want to see continue to occur. And there's either positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement. And again, sometimes those words positive and negative can carry certain connotations with them, but when we're talking about them within the context of the basic principle of reinforcement.
If we're talking about it in the basic context of ABA, it's totally okay. It's not bad. Negative isn't bad if it's ABA.
All that positive means is an addition, whereas negative means the removal of something.
And negative is literally negative. When you remove something, they're removing the child's favorite objects to force them to do what they want to, what they want the kids to do.
So positive reinforcement adds a stimulus to the environment.
And it adds manipulation. It teaches the kids manipulation.
Stimulus is just a fancy word to mean something. So maybe we're adding our verbal behavior. Maybe we're adding an item. Maybe we're adding some kind of activity or event or access to something. So some examples that I gave were maybe...
When I was a young child, I went through what became ABA eventually, and it was in the early 70s. And I did learn one very important thing. They talk about an ABA adding or taking away thing for positive or negative reinforcement and so forth. And they tried that with me. And what I learned from that was not the positive, negative reinforcement stuff that they wanted. What I learned is that they were manipulating me. I learned that they were taking things away from me to try to manipulate me, or they were trying to give me things for favors to manipulate me. So what I learned from them was that adults manipulate children, and not to ever trust adults because they are manipulators. That's what I learned from ABA. And guess what? I was right. This is David Page. Screw them. Flop-harder. When I was a young child, I went through what became ABA eventually. And it was in the early 70s. And I did learn one very important thing. They talk about an ABA adding or taking away thing for positive or negative reinforcement and so forth. And they tried that with me. And what I learned from that was not the positive, negative reinforcement stuff that they wanted. What I learned is that they were manipulating me. When I was a young child, I went through what became ABA eventually, and it was in the early 70s. And I did learn one very important thing. They talk about an ABA adding or taking away thing for positive or negative reinforcement and so forth, and they tried that. And what I learned from that was not the positive, negative reinforcement stuff that they wanted. What I learned is that they were manipulating me.
I got a new fidget spinner. I want to
Hello.
review, and if you know me,
crossbow back. Let the march of the band go. Played off as cream. I'm trying to wrap my head around it.
I'm returning it because I just don't love it. It washes me.
Okay.
Maybe
Moving
saying
right along.
"Good job" or giving access to a preferred toy. On the flip side of that, negative reinforcement means that we're removing something from the environment, such as some kind of aversive situation. So for example, let's say that some siblings are playing together and one of the siblings says, "Stop, I don't like that." And that gets that other sibling to stop their behavior, to remove that aversive situation. That would be an example of negative reinforcement. In contrast to that, we have punishment. And punishment means that we are decreasing the future frequency of behavior. And again, you're going to have either positive punishment or negative punishment. So you're either adding something to the environment, such as saying no or stop doing that. That's making the behavior decrease. Or sometimes giving a timeout could be an example of positive punishment. And then again, negative punishment would be removing something from the environment. So maybe taking away a preferred toy or something like that. I also like to point out that there are ethical considerations when we're using these types of principles within our treatments and intervention approaches. So we're going to talk a little bit about that later on, but just something to keep in mind that, for instance, we're always going to try to use reinforcement first before we look at using punishment procedures. And the last basic principle is extinction. So extinction just looks at removing specific reinforcement that was previously available. So for example...
So this is all basic mind control. All basic mind control techniques that we're using here. Very, very, very basic mind control techniques. Basic influence.
If Robert was engaging in inappropriate attention-seeking behaviors, we would look at no longer providing that attention to Robert while he's engaging in some of those challenging behaviors. But again, what would be important to note about that is that if we're going to remove reinforcement for the inappropriate behaviors, we want to make sure that we're providing it for an appropriate behavior. And that's where you're going to hear us talk a little bit later on in terms of replacement behaviors and those things like that. But the goal of extinction is that it's helping to decrease the likelihood that a behavior will occur in the future. With extinction, sometimes you may hear or learn about an extinction burst. This means that a behavior might temporarily increase in intensity or duration. So it's something that, again, there has to be some ethical considerations made around in terms of making sure that everyone feels comfortable with the procedures and that there's plans in place while this may occur.